extension for water systems that need more time to comply. And that does not mean a blanket delay. The 2029 deadline still applies. For systems that affirmatively request additional time and that meet the criteria we will set out in the final rule, they can potentially receive up to 2 additional years until 2031 to get their treatment in place. Systems that don't opt in will stay on the original timeline. This is about being realistic. Technologies are still being developed. Congress is considering what to do about the passive receiver situation, and costs hopefully will be reduced substantially over the coming years. A deadline you cannot physically meet is not a public health protection. It's a setup for litigation, delay, unintended consequences, and hardship. Third, as previously announced, we are proposing to rescind and restart the regulation for 4 other PFAS: PFHXS, PFNA, Gen X chemicals, and PFBS as part of a hazard index. And it's not because they don't matter. They might warrant strict standards, possibly even stricter than what was previously regulated. But because the previous administration didn't follow the procedural and substantive step-by-step requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act when it regulated them, that rule has been extremely vulnerable legally and already subject to ongoing litigation. If a court throws it out later, we can lose years. The Safe Drinking Water Act requires a sequential approach to regulation, where the agency must first propose to regulate a particular drinking water contaminant and then seek public comment on whether the idea of a regulation is appropriate. Only after the public has had the opportunity to comment on that proposal, and when the EPA has then finalized the determination to regulate, may the EPA then publish a proposed rule regarding a new regulation of that contaminant. Instead of abiding by that process set out in the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Biden EPA combined steps simultaneously, which isn't permitted, denying the public a chance to weigh in on the threshold question for PFHXS, PFNA, HFPO-DA, and the index PFAS prior to locking in the new standard. So we're going to do this again, and we're going to do it right. And this could result in stronger requirements, and they will be built on a record that will hold. And not for nothing, it's also important to point out that technologies that are developed to meet an MCL on PFOA and PFOS can also incidentally and very consequentially be treating other forms of PFAS in the process. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation to be able to talk about that point as well. Now, I'll close with this. Every American deserves to know that the water coming out of their tap is safe. And the EPA is going to deliver on that by following the law, following the science, and giving water systems the time, tools, and support they need to actually get the job done. And I'm looking forward to speaking today with everyone here about the ways we can address PFAS to ensure future generations have safe drinking water, land, and air. And it's my great honor at this time to introduce somebody who has been a pioneer as it relates to PFAS, a passionate advocate for safe drinking water, somebody as a New Yorker, I've seen firsthand how strongly his contributions have resulted in better water quality throughout the state. He has been a great leader of the Make America Healthy Again coalition and movement. It's been an honor to serve with him, and we're grateful to have him here with us today, Secretary Robert Kennedy, Jr.
Thank you, Lee. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. Today's announcement reflects a major step forward in the Trump administration's effort to make America healthy again by confronting environmental exposures that are contributing to chronic disease across the country. More than 95% of Americans now have PFAS chemicals in their blood or in their drinking water, and it remains one of the primary sources of exposure. Studies show PFAS exposure damages the liver and kidneys. It weakens the immune function and increases risk for cancer, diabetes, pregnancy complications, and developmental harms. This issue is personal for millions of American families, and it has been personal for me for a long time. For decades, communities were exposed to these chemicals without transparency or accountability. Years ago, beginning in 2001, I worked with families in Ohio and West Virginia whose drinking water had been contaminated by PFAS contaminants released into their communities. That case helped expose the scale of this problem nationally and resulted in a $671 million settlement for affected residents. Mark Ruffalo later made a movie of that lawsuit called Dark Waters, and it was one of the vehicles by which the PFAS problem became known to the American people. And I've worked also on many other PFAS cases. As president of the Waterkeeper Alliance, we had PFAS cases on the Tennessee River, the Alabama, all over the country, and many of those were the milestone cases that really brought PFAS to the attention of the American public. I feel very fortunate that one of the great other champions in PFAS in this country is somebody I'm serving with in the cabinet with, is Lee Zeldin. Lee, when he was congressman from the eastern end of Long Island, had 3 major PFAS contaminant dump zones in his district, and he spent a lot of time and attention championing the cleanup of those. And then when he came into Congress in 2014, he joined the PFAS task force, and he was one of the few Republicans who supported the PFAS legislation that began this process. I've read a couple of articles in the corporate media that suggest that EPA is trying to roll back PFAS regulations. It's not true. I've met repeatedly with Lee and his staff, and they're completely committed to ending exposures in a way that's legal and practical. As Lee pointed out, the Biden administration passed a rule very hastily in which they ignored a Clean Water Act mandate for a public comment period. That means I've brought many, many Administrative Procedure Acts and Clean Water Act cases, hundreds of them literally, and I can tell you that that was a fatal flaw. This regulation from the Biden administration would not stand a court challenge, and the court challenge has already been filed. And what we're doing today is shaving years from a process where that regulation would get thrown out and we would have to start again. And we're doing it in a way that maintains the Clean Water Act levels, the maximum contaminant safe drinking water act levels, the maximum contaminant levels, and gives maximum production as quickly as possible to the American public. And one of the really exciting things that's happened since Administrator Zeldin and I came in 16 months ago, there's been an explosion in technology for removing PFAS and destroying it. That makes it much more, that will make it much more affordable for these little water districts that are already besieged by costs, and many of them are near bankruptcy. And I'm looking very forward to hearing the comments from some of these companies today that have developed some of these technologies. But Lee and I get besieged probably weekly with people who want to showcase new technologies for removing PFAS. Well, I'm very encouraged. Plus, we have a president who's completely committed to removing PFAS, to understanding it, understanding the exposures, and to eliminating those exposures for the American public, and has made a greater financial commitment to understanding PFAS and removing it than any president in history. At HHS, our responsibility is to better understand what these chemicals are doing to human health and how we can reduce exposures and move forward. NIH and our other federal health agencies are currently supporting more than 40 research groups studying how PFAS exposure affects children's development, pregnancy outcomes, immune function, metabolic health, fertility, liver toxicity, and chronic disease risk. Researchers are studying how PFAS exposures during pregnancy may affect birth outcomes and childhood development. Other NIH-supported work is examining links between PFAS exposures and immune system suppression, inflammation, liver injury, and metabolic disorders like obesity and diabetes. Emerging research is also exploring how PFAS may alter the gut microbiome and contribute to chronic disease. Last month, HHS launched STOMP, Systematic Targeting of Microplastics, a first-of-its-kind federal initiative focused on improving how the government measures, studies, and removes microplastics and nanoplastics from the human body. We are expanding research into the environmental drivers of chronic disease with transparency, accountability, and gold standard science. At the same time, EPA is taking important action to reduce PFAS exposures before they reach the American public. Today's announcement includes nearly $1 billion in new funding to help states and communities address PFAS contamination in drinking water. EPA is also proposing 2 rules that strengthen drinking water protections while giving communities workable and legally durable paths to compliance. Public health protections only work if communities can implement them and if the courts uphold them. Otherwise, communities are left with uncertainty instead of solutions. EPA and HHS are addressing PFAS at every stage, from contamination exposure to treatment, monitoring, and long-term research. Americans want honest science, accountability, and policies that improve health outcomes and protect future generations. This is exactly what we are working to deliver. I also want to say, Administrator Zeldin, I've lived through a lot of EPA administrators, and Administrator Zeldin has been more willing to sit down and meet and have civil, congenial meetings with the environmental community as much as any administration that I have seen in my lifetime. I'm very grateful to him for that, and I look forward to hearing from today's experts about the next generation of PFAS treatment, the destruction technologies that will help us reduce exposures, protect public health, and deliver long-term lasting solutions for the American public.
Thank you, Administrator Zeldin and Secretary Kennedy. What I want to start with the panel discussion today is a brief overview from each of you. I'm going to introduce you, and if you could give just a high-level, quick summary of the technology that your company has, so that we can kind of set a baseline of the different kinds of technologies that we have at the table today. So I'm going to start with Dave Ross, Executive Vice President of Veolia North America.
Hey, thanks, Jess. I appreciate that. Hey, so Dave Ross, I'm with Veolia in North America. We're the world's largest environmental services company, and we touch PFAS. I think the administrator used the phrase life cycle, at every step in the life cycle, whether or not it's destroying AFFF, unused stocks, to we've got 30 plus drinking water systems up and running and another 50 in planning, so we'll be treating water for over 1 million customers throughout the country, to treating it industrial wastewater or wastewater. Yeah, biosolids is a major issue for us. All the way to we're a very large waste management company, and so we'll take, and that's the technology I'm going to focus on because we have quite a bit. In fact, I think we may have tested every company on the stage at some point in our process. We work with all the startup companies and the mature companies on the best treatment that we can possibly get. We've really pivoted pretty significantly at the back end. And there's a lot of concern about how do you get rid of PFAS through incineration. There's been a lot of concern about what goes up the stack. And so using EPA's new revised guidance, and thank you for committing to doing that every single year. That's huge for the industry. We've used EPA's guidance and the Department of War's guidance to make sure that we can destroy up to 6 log removal, so 99.9999% destruction of PFAS compounds. So as the companies up here take it out of the water column or the waste column, or our technology does, you know, there are lots of different ways to destroy it, but we do have a back-end disposal where we can incinerate it safely through our network. And so for the really difficult to treat waste, that's where we're focused a lot of our effort on innovation.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. Next, I want to go to Michelle Belanca, CEO of Claros Technologies.
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Belanca, CEO of Claros Technologies. What I'd like to focus on in terms of what we do is really education and awareness and changing the narrative on PFAS destruction. When we talk about destruction, are we talking about total defluorination of PFAS? Are we talking about capture, adsorption? Are we talking about concentration? I worked at 3M for 24 years. I'm very familiar with these chemicals, and when I left 3M, my passion was really around how do you go after the destruction part of this problem? So there's 2 pieces that you've got in the environment right now. You've got the legacy that exists that needs to be cleaned up, right? You've also got the perpetuation of using these materials in many cases for essential applications, right? And how do you keep them out of end of pipe in the environment? And this is where we're focused at Claros. So we do what's called total destruction, defluorination. There's 15,000 PFAS species that are out there. You heard Administrator Zeldin talk about. We're focused on a couple today. But the key at Claros is we do very high-speed destruction, number 1. We do it at scale and at source, meaning we're right in those facilities, we're in those industrials, we're in the groundwater. We can go to the municipal site, and we're destroying the PFAS across the long, the short, and the ultra-short. So to Administrator Zeldin's point, we're not just focusing on what today we are looking at regulating. We're focused on, for the same economics, at high speed, for these essential applications in these different areas, groundwater, wastewater, industrial water with these big users and makers, how do we provide the public safety for the same economics, the total destruction across the long, the short, and the ultra-short PFAS, with technologies that go into existing infrastructure today and cost pennies per gallon from an affordability standpoint? Because this is how you're going to start to make a difference. You've got to clean up the legacy piece. We do that as well. But if you can take high flow destruction with total defluorination, meaning you're not left with ultra short PFAS at the end, right? You've destroyed the long, the short, and the ultra short economically for public safety and health. Then you can use these materials essentially, you can keep them out of end of pipe across all of these PFAS, and you can also go after the legacy business as well. What we've done to date is that we've had temporary solutions, but that's really moving the liability from the water to waste. But to be fair, we haven't had solutions like we're talking about on the stage today with emerging technologies until the last couple of years. These chemicals were called forever because they are really difficult to destroy. It's one of the toughest man-made bonds. And so what we do at Claros is at the source, at high flows, at economics that are affordable, we take the forever out of forever chemicals.
Thanks, Michelle. Next, I want to move to Frank Cassou, founder and CEO of Cyclopure.
Thanks, Jess. I'm Frank at Cyclopure. We developed Dexorb, a novel absorbent to remove PFAS. It's selective for PFAS. We're an innovative technology. So the company's been around since 2016. And to start and scale a new technology to enter the water industry and get adoption, it takes a lot of development and a lot of support. And we've had a lot of support from the government. If you look at my bio, we have been supported along the way by NSF, NIEHS, EPA, and the Department of War as well. And so all of that funding has helped us become a mature technology that is now being commercially deployed across the U.S. As Administrator Zeldin highlighted, it's important to remove PFAS out of the water cycle. So distribution is obviously a critical point so that it's not being consumed by households and residents. But at the same time, you want to be removing it from discharges, so it's not going back into the water cycle from industrial activities leachate. And then you want to tap the storage, which is groundwater remediation as well. So being selective, we're able to work in each of those environmental matrices. So we can work at the drinking water level, we can work at industrial. The industrial side is an economic side as much as it's a health side, because we work with semiconductor companies. Obviously, there's a huge amount of that is going on these days with the advancement of AI. We work with the automobile industry and metal plating. We work with landfill leachate. We work with pulp and paper. So pretty much any industry that you see that is now facing the challenge of removing PFAS and the extra cost needs to have an efficient technology to do that. So we're working in that sector as well. Another space that is challenging is households that are on well water. So roughly 15% of the U.S. population is on well water and not covered by municipal drinking. And so that is an area where we're working with states to test water. We use our technology for water testing. We also deliver point-of-use systems that can be used there. So it's really important that people that are on well can have access to tools to determine whether they have PFAS in their water, and then a solution to do that because they're not on municipal systems. So, and in terms of cost, I think that, one of the biggest challenges, as Administrator Zeldin highlighted, is cost, because PFAS is a tax now that is on industry, it's on drinking water plants, and so how do they do that? They can do it from settlements, from litigation, they can do it from rate increases, they can also do it from government funding, but it's a cost, and so with our technology, DexOrb, we're selective, so you need less of it at implementation, you need less infrastructure. At the end, in the back end, and this is how we work with both Claros and Veolia, we can desorb the PFAS, reuse the media, but we also isolate and capture the PFAS concentrate, and then we take that to folks like Claros or Veolia for destruction. So that's a huge, if you think about a project that we're working with in New Jersey, it's 500 metric tons of media. Well, when you get to change out, you've got 500 metric tons of media that has PFAS in it. So what we can do is desorb that PFAS, concentrate it, and then take it to, to a destruction vendor. That's extremely important in reducing the cost. So if we can reduce the costs, we're also reducing that funding cap that people are looking to do through government funding or class action settlements. So.
Excellent, thank you. Matt Meerseman, CEO of Desotech USA.
Awesome, thank you, Jessica. So yes, Matthias is my name. I'm CEO for Desotech, an organization that was founded in 1990 overseas, headquartered in Belgium globally. Active in the US for about 3 years now. We're a company that provides mobile filtration systems for PFAS removal in air and water streams. Essentially, that means that we use products to capture PFAS at the source, bring it to central locations, and destroy it. So as some of us have said already, it is forever no more. Our role in public health in the US is to allow industrial sites where the PFAS is heavily concentrated, to allow municipalities who need to get drinking water to their communities, and to allow remediation sites to cope with PFAS and to cope with it rapidly. And by rapidly, I mean in a matter of days. We deploy immediately available systems that capture this contaminant and have technology in-house to destroy it fully. What sets us apart in that realm is essentially bridging that gap because we know that the problem is present throughout the entirety of the US, and we know it's going to require a lot of capital funding, for which the gratitude to Minister Zeldin of opening up that checkbook, so to say. But simultaneously, all of these projects are going to take a lot of time. Infrastructure has a lead time. You can only do so many projects at any given point in time, which is a gap which we bridge with Desotech by supplying readily available mobile systems out to both industrial sites as well as municipalities to capture and destroy, since, again, infrastructure takes time, it takes years to build, but the need, the purification, the removal of PFAS has no time to wait. So we're very happy to be here today in the panel.
Excellent, thanks so much, Matt. And last but not least, Barry Shadricks, Global Director and GM for Water and Remediation, Setco.
Thank you, Jess. So at Setco is a subsidiary of Minerals Technologies Company, a New York-based company focused on water and remediation solutions that protect communities from harmful contaminants. We've been doing environmental remediation for decades for legacy contamination on large Superfund sites like the Gowanus Canal and the Great Lakes area of concern. For PFAS, we're looking at the PFAS landscape holistically. Our technology is versatile in the way that it can be deployed. Upstream, we're working with defense and industrial clients to utilize our technology in situ to capture the PFAS in the ground, to prevent the groundwater and surface water from migrating to other sites and sensitive water receptors. This strategy reduces the amount of PFAS reaching those sensitive receptors, and thus the utilities will see less PFAS in their source water. For municipalities, our goal is to provide our technologies to capture PFAS for potable water, allowing the utilities to meet their compliance goals and protect human health. The way our product is designed with high surface area, fast kinetics, and on a mineral-based substrate, it is among the lowest cost of ownership products on the market. It allows for lower capital installations and very high capacity, so the change-out frequencies of the media is far less than other media on the market.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So we've got about 15 minutes that we can do kind of an open dialogue roundtable, but I'm going to go ahead and kick us off with a question unless Mr. Administrator or Mr. Secretary, you have any questions to start. Otherwise, I'm going to dive right in. I'd like to talk a little bit about the trajectory of affordability. One of the things that the Administrator and the Secretary talked about in their opening remarks was concerns related to affordability when it comes to compliance with regulation. And I know a couple of you, Michelle especially, spoke a little bit about cost. Talk to me a little bit more about the biggest challenges with affordability for these types of technologies, and how do we combat those challenges with affordability? And we can start right at Michelle if you want to start.
I'll jump in.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sure. I think up until a point, the process of capture and then disposal, destruction, has kind of been non-integrated. So you could have the transfer of PFAS waste to the destruction vendors has been quite costly. So I think if you can have technologies like ours that can concentrate the waste stream and integrate it with the destruction vendor, you're going to have a much more efficient process all the way through the treatment cycle.
That's great. Thanks, Frank. And I saw Barry, he dove at the microphone, and then Michelle will come back to you.
Yeah, no, that's probably the number one question that we get from clients is what is this going to cost, and will it reliably meet our compliance goals? And the answer is yes, it will meet the compliance goals, because we've seen that over and over, removing the compounds. The question is, how long will it remove the compounds? And that's one of the things when we were developing this product, is to develop a high capacity media where we could extend change-out frequencies as long as 4 and 5 times other media, and that would impact the lower cost of ownership. Another key piece is kinetics. Right? So how long does the water need to be in contact with the adsorptive media to transfer out of the water phase onto the media? And when we look at that, we needed something that was going to act fast. Some media need 10 to 20 minutes of contact time. When you translate that into capital equipment, that's some large equipment. Our media can remove the PFAS out of water in as small as 2 minutes, and that will lend itself to much smaller capital footprint equipment.
That's great. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. I think it's about matchmaking, right? At the end of the day, know your place and be really honest about where you fit, because the environment and the industry are going to require multiple tools in the toolbox to effectively remediate PFAS on a global basis, much less here in the United States, right? There's all sorts of technologies. Know your place and where you really work well. Right? So for example, at Claros, we do permanent PFAS destruction in line, in water, at the source, right? So if we, with our large PFAS makers, we've gone public with Daikin, they're one of the largest in the world. We're commercially installing at their facility. They're running hundreds of gallons a minute. If we can most effectively meet the customer's needs by taking out all of the PFAS without an interim step, do it. right? Because it's the most economical. That option didn't exist at a commercial scale a year ago, so know better, do better. But there are other applications like Frank is talking about where it makes complete sense to concentrate up first and then do destruction. And in that application, that is the best fit and it's the most economical. Where I think sometimes I see in the industry we get into trouble, we try to be what we're not, right? And we try and go after everything. And the more awareness that we have leads to education and it leads to better informed decision making so that as policymakers are looking at this, they know the accurate information and they can determine what the right solutions are, because you will need multiple tools in the toolbox to address the PFAS remediation challenge that we have. And they are here today. They weren't a year ago, 5 years ago. I would also say that it depends on if you can economically today destroy permanently all of the PFAS, the long, the short, and the ultra short for the same economics that you can destroy PFOA and PFOS or some of the long chain, then do it. And that should also be part of the equation when you look at the return on investment from not just the short term, but the long-term public health standpoint. That's the economics at the end of the day that matters the most.
That's great. If I can, unless anybody else wants to dive at their microphone, I want to pivot off of something that Michelle said. She talked about matchmaking. And I think one of the biggest challenges in the water sector is the diversity of the workforce. You have a completely different workforce for your very small and rural communities than you do for your very large municipalities. As the folks who are developing these technologies, how do you account for that diversity in workforce, and how do you, as you're going through this matchmaking process, how do you ensure that you are tailoring, you are lining that community up with a technology that's going to set them up for success, not operations and maintenance failures down the road? Dave?
Yeah, that's a challenging one. In fact, I was happy a month ago when you announced the Water Workforce Initiative, because it is so absolutely critical. We're seeing workforce challenges. We run drinking water, wastewater, and as the new technology, whether or not it's driven by regulations out of this building or the technology is accelerating, as our workforce is aging, the skills gap is accelerating as well. And so it's a higher technology. Every one of these technologies up on the stage is relatively sophisticated to operate. And so you need to be looking at workforce pipeline. The financial incentive and help for rural America is absolutely critical, because the skill set there to be able to run a system. We've got a lot of systems that we run that are a couple thousand people when we're installing PFAS. There's not an operator in that local community who can do it. And so we're thinking about the workforce side and the skills gap. That's why Veolia launched free workforce training in the water wastewater sector for anyone who wants to take it, because we hope they come work for Veolia, but the water sector needs it, and we need people who understand the technology, because the technology is accelerating as fast as our needs are.
Matt?
Yeah, I want to add an important element.
Sorry, Frank, I'll get you next. Sorry.
It's crucial, and I see this with every single panelist today, that the PFAS problem, as we face it, cannot be solved by a product. All the companies that are here today, including, of course, ourselves with Desotech, we see PFAS as a question that can only be answered with a solution. And a solution means that as a technology provider, yes, you have, whether it is granular activated carbon, whether it's osmosis, whether it's resins, you have a product, but you need to be able to bring it to industrials, to communities, to municipalities, combined and easy to use. Dave, as you were saying as well, it can't have too many bells and whistles. It has to be easy to operate, and mostly, since you're targeting PFAS at the source, if it is brought somewhere else, you also need to have a tail end solution. So that has been one thing which has been essential throughout the journey of Desotech, but throughout the journey of many of us here, that yes, we look at PFAS as a problem, but in order to bring it to the market, it has to be a whole full-fledged solution where you can provide, one, certainty, because of course operators, they seek guarantees. They have to be sure if they either put capital in, if they have operational expenses, that it's going to be worth it. That's the certainty you have to provide, and of course simplicity. The easier it is to explain, the easier it is to say, I'm going to bring a vessel in, you're going to hook up, and the PFAS is going to be gone. We take it back and we destroy it. Simplicity here is king in the equation.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. That makes a lot of sense. Frank, I'm going to turn to you now.
Yeah. So I think it's a little different between water treatment and maybe destruction. So, water treatment for PFAS is pretty straightforward. It's just like traditional methods, packed bed filtration or gravity. And so we go into communities across the country, whether we're in Nikiski, Alaska, Muscle Shoals, Passaic Valley, New Jersey. The workforce is actually pretty trained and sophisticated because we're just saying, hey, here's a vessel, you're putting in a different media type, and basically you've just got to monitor it. And then when the media is saturated, we take it, replace it, and then we concentrate it, regenerate it, and then send it off. So I've been pleasantly surprised, across the country that, the engineering firms that are supporting, local small communities and the people that are working at the plants are extremely proud of the work they do and are very well trained, actually. So, like I say, we've got something that's in a remote part of Alaska where, it's serving 85 residents, right? So I think maybe it's a little different in destruction where it's a little more complicated than our side, but it's traditional stuff and we're just drop-in replacement.
Mr. Administrator?
Well, I guess just picking up on the Alaska point, I was in Fort Richardson last June. There was a company with a prototype zero for their company. They were given a contract from the military base to clean up 6,000 tons of contaminated soil of PFAS. Fort Richardson has the challenge of, and Alaska has the challenge of sending their contaminated soil out of state to the lower 48 with a lot of cost. And as they were implementing prototype zero and cleaning up the 6,000 tons of contaminated soil, they learned so much for their next version of the prototype that's going to allow them to scale up, and they were getting increasing confidence that they could get a 600,000 ton contract, and it's economical for them to scale up. It would be more economical for Alaska or Fort Richardson to be able to clean it up on the spot as opposed to sending it to the lower 48. And I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts or perspective of any state or local municipality or entity that has this responsibility, this burden as a passive receiver of cleaning up PFAS, where you see that they are either currently or on the verge of spending very inefficiently, and you have advice really for states and local governments and the water systems and more on what they could be doing better to save tax dollars.
Barry's up.
Yeah, on that comment, I would just mention we're doing a lot of piloting around large surface water plants. I think early on, most of our piloting was around groundwater, but in surface water, those large volumes of water that need to be treated is quite extensive. And the thoughts of building a post-polish plant just for PFAS can be very capital intensive. So we're seeing a lot of piloting going on now where utilities are looking at using our technology in a primary filtration methodology to remove TSS and solids as well as PFAS and implementing that into existing infrastructure. And I think that's something that should absolutely be vetted out before large capital spends are being deployed into secondary capital treatment plants.
That makes a lot of sense. Dave?
Yeah, I would encourage Administrator take a look at some of the states that are struggling with the biosolid space. There are a few states that have worked on a land application ban, Maine and a few others, and some legislation that's being introduced in New York. You'll see having to do interstate shipment of what used to be handled locally. So you're introducing cost, transportation costs, and disposal costs. And so trying to come up with innovation in the biosolid space that preserves the ability to use the beneficial nutrients in the biosolids, but also protect against the harm from emerging contaminants like PFAS. That's a delicate policy balance, and I think some federal leadership in the state spaces would be helpful, Because you have a lot of communities, particularly in New England, who are struggling with this issue right now. And so I think some additional enhanced guidance in that space. I also think some more innovation. Innovation grant funding, particularly in that biosolid space. That some of it's just getting the energy cost curve down to make it more affordable. So I think the federal government has a very significant role to play, whether or not it's innovation grants or Department of Energy has a great innovation program. I think that's a focus that can be accelerated in the future.
Michelle?
I was going to add to that. I think, once again, it does come back to awareness and education, even for these water municipalities. I'll take Minnesota, for example, which is where we're based at Claros. Minnesota's ground zero for the PFAS challenge that we've got. They're one of the 2 original inventors of these materials, and the amount of contamination and remediation within Minnesota is massive, right? And we're in their backyard as the solution at ground zero. And even within Minnesota, what I'm astounded at, and we're just starting to break it, the tip of the iceberg is there, is cutting through the noise that these municipalities face, because they're being barraged with all of these different types of solutions that supposedly work. And these people have jobs to do without assessing all of this information, and they have incomplete information at their fingertips. So if you and I are in their position and you're running a water municipality and you've got people calling on you, how do you tell what information is legit, correct, scalable, economically affordable? What works? One of the best pieces of advice I would say is look at, can we develop a blanket educational memorandum that real-time basis goes out to these municipalities across the United States of what is best available technology today, so that we help them do their work, right? And then they have the ability, with the education and awareness, to make informed decisions. But we just lived this in Minnesota last week, where we're in their backyard, right? Daikin's gone public, we're at scale, we're commercial, economical, high flow, permanent destruction, everything a municipality could want. And they were really nervous. Number one, they weren't aware of us. An engineering firm brought us to them, and we're in Minnesota. And then number two, when they brought us, they had all sorts of questions because they just didn't have the right available data in front of them. And so I think it still does also start with education and awareness.
I hate to shut down such an amazing conversation, but I do know that the Secretary has a hard out here, and so 30 seconds or less? All right.
30 seconds. Okay, so related to this, there's best available technologies. Currently in the EPA, framework, it refers to GAC, IXR, and reverse osmosis, so it kind of is BAT, right? It drives us a little bit, BAT, bleep. So a lot of times we encounter a municipality that says, well, we're only going to go with BAT, right? Even though we've got, validated operational systems, we do run into incidences where somebody says, hey, we can't afford any risk, so we're just going to go with BAT. We are working through it. Obviously, the more systems we install, the more validation we get. ITRC is helping us get elevated in their new report. So I just somehow, if there could be some reevaluation of BAT for the new technologies that are working and are out in the field.
That's a very valid point, and I see our amazing staff in the Office of Water here in the front row are writing feverishly. So I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for joining us today. Look forward to working with all of you moving forward, and appreciate all of you joining us today. Out at 4.
Yeah, we're working on it.
What is your message to the parents about the virus?
Mr. Secretary? It was so nice to meet you. So nice to meet you.
Is that the first public mention? You're the lead?
nice to meet you too. Yeah, you did a super, super job. Thank you.